see that.
Yeah. So he gave an example in, I think it was chapter 3, or that begins in chapter 2. He develops this method for like, you should be able to take main points and concrete, like you should be able to take main points or key ideas from the thing you're learning and just explain it in a way that's both abstract and concrete. So you give examples.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously existence exists. I could write a bit about it. But then I found that as I started writing them, I'm like, I actually don't know that much, despite having read through this.
Yeah.
Like, and then it became, I started asking myself, like, if you can't fully explain some of these key ideas, do you actually understand? If I can broadly say, all right, I get that I use reason to think and validate knowledge, like, and that, but
Yeah.
my level of understanding isn't that much more detailed than that. You could still say you understand. It's just, it's more like the dim outline of a child that
Right.
sees a human, right? And
Yeah,
says,
I would say so.
yeah,
It
okay.
just gets clearer over time. But you have to consider though that the methods of thinking you're using to write this all out is not just like you understand a particular fact, because you're also learning about how to think and how to think. You can't always just, you're applying the method of what you're learning to explaining what you're learning. Like it reinforces itself in a way.
By giving that
You'll know.
example.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing
Yeah,
to do
okay.
that. That
That's
by
funny.
thinking about this, you're engaging the principles you've been thinking about. You've been
Mm,
engaging the way to break down a problem, the way
yeah,
to
that's
talk
true.
about a problem, the concepts
Yeah,
to mention.
that's interesting. Yeah. Initially, I was discouraged because I could barely get anything out. But now that you say that, and I'm thinking of that example that I just thought of now of like, I guess you can just see the dim outline of something, but it's still true, right?
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
just,
you're recognizing the things out there. You're trying to get a concrete grasp of it, but you're seeing the thing that they're referring to. You know what peak up is referring to, probably
yeah,
more clearly than before. At least you know what
yeah.
the stuff is. If you don't know about it, but at least you know what it is, like the thing you look at or what you're looking at.
All right, let's find one that I was like, this just seems so, I guess with axioms, because they're tautologies, there's not that much you can really
No,
say, right? Like you could talk a lot,
everything
but
yeah, anything else you say about them is just expanding on it. Like there isn't much to say on specifically the law of
yeah,
identity. I mean, you could expand into causality and what is it to be to have in nature and things like that. But specifically, A is A. There isn't much more to be said. That's
I,
why they're kind of foundations. There isn't anything else to it.
I guess the way I could expand on it if I wanted to was because this is kind of like a thing cannot be itself and itself at the same time. It would be give examples that are way less obvious, which I don't have in my head any, but yeah, like concretize it in that way. But I
Yeah,
don't have that. Okay, so where was one that? Yeah, this is a good one. Maybe there's a lot of them that were like this, but okay, I didn't check anything. I didn't read
yeah,
anything. It's just everything that came to my head, and I copied
yeah,
mainly the order of the OPAR structure.
yeah,
But I wrote everything has an identity, so does consciousness. It has a certain nature too. It's a thing. Uh, I'm just repeating myself. We perceive existence using our senses, which have a certain nature. Volume gets louder when nearing the thing, lower when getting away. We can see different colors. We are perceiving things in a certain form, and the form is determined by the nature of our consciousness. Not sure what else to say here. Like it feels so. It's just a lot of them when I'm writing them, I feel like I get it, but it's a very maybe it goes back to what we're saying. It's supposed to be broad. It's not that great of an explanation. It's not for communication. It's for self-understanding. So this is the natural evolution, you think, right?
yeah. Really, all consciousness says, I mean, identity is just to say that it identifies the world. It identifies it in a particular way.
Yeah.
You might not know what the way is, but you know just by identifying that it has an identity, like everything else. It's
I,
looking at the world.
I guess what I'm looking at is what I'm thinking is, shouldn't I have way more concrete examples? Like, how does this affect everything else? Like, that's not in my head. That's not,
Yeah,
it's
I
not,
don't think you could really do it that way, just starting
okay.
here to give concretes. I think you would need first to understand. I mean, yeah, you recognize that consciousness is a thing and has an identity, and you can recognize that, but concretizing is difficult. I mean, that's where you got to build up on so many other concepts before it really starts to click. Like you
Right.
need to understand some understanding of free will, some
Right.
understanding of perception before you actually see what this thing is consciousness.
Hmm. Right.
You start to see the nature of it, what it does. You really need to see and understand
And
is
have first-hand
perceive,
examples.
yeah, perceive what is perception, cognition, and free will. Things like
In,
that help you.
from my understanding, though, I wouldn't even need to be a professional philosopher to get to that level, because if this
No,
is such a fundamental field, I should find applications in everything,
yeah,
even and tons of examples all the time, but they're not exactly forthcoming. I tried volition and it just reduced to,
yeah. I think we need to spend some time on that one, on volition.
I
We haven't
can
done
ask,
much on that.
it just reduced to me asking a bunch of questions.
Yeah,
All right, but I guess the idea is this is the right idea. I'm just copying this template that was in understanding objectivism, and I just do that for every idea, right? And then just see where gaps are, and then just keep coming back to it.
yeah. You're recognizing here what you've identified as important, or what's sticking out in your mind, and what you're building from. And
Right,
in a way, this is what is structured in your mind. This organization is probably mirroring how you think of it in your head, where
well,
you have
I did
top.
copy,
Yeah,
OPA. I wasn't really sure on the order apart from axioms,
right.
but
But I'm saying that regardless of where you got it from, it seems to be this is what how it's even structured in your brain. That even when you think
right,
about it, you've got it organized pretty much already.
right. Although there is less, the only thing, so I've got it in my brain and I can see it, but they are still separate facts to it. They're not as
Yeah,
clearly connected to everything else, all the virtues and
yeah,
stuff, which we will get to. But cool. I mean, that's encouraging. All right. So just doesn't matter if they're just little, if Peikoff has wrote 10 pages about one thing, if we've got a little paragraph, that's something.
yeah. I think so. And once we get through this chapter, probably, then we can start trying to connect those concepts together, like integrate them together as a system, or how do they work together. Right
Right.
now, we're just trying to understand things on their own terms.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It did say that in understanding objectivism, like in any, I guess this applies to any subject, but you'll take a certain context as a given, even if you're not sure you understand the context. And then you understand what's being taught for that specific concept.
Yes,
And then you
I
can
would say
come
so.
back to the context, right? It,
Yeah,
and
always
that,
come back, but don't. Yeah, you stick to the context. You do understand, or at least try to see what is being said and why is it being said, and you could build
but,
from there.
but you can study it, but it wasn't the idea you can study something without really being sure of the context. You just assume it as
Yes.
true. And then you can come
Yeah.
back to, yeah.
Yeah, as long as you remember that you're making that assumption. But then, yeah,
Right.
if you know you're making the assumption, then I think that's appropriate.
Right. Okay. We're almost done on this virtue chapter.
Yeah.
So they talk about if anyone says anything, so this is the virtue of justice we're back onto. He talks about if someone says something where your silence could be construed as a disagreement, as an agreement, you should say you disagree if you do disagree. What I'm curious about in the context where no action is being taken, how do they formulate that? Oh, okay, that's what justice is. Like, how do you is it simply to like what would be the purpose of that? I didn't quite get it. Like, let's say you're at a party and someone talks about I don't know, a different conception of rights, and they're just talking about it in relation to, I don't know, animals or something like that. It's really got nothing. They're not doing anything with it. It's really got nothing to do with anything. Like,
Mhm.
what the formulation of you should say you disagree. Like, what does that do?
Um, I'm not sure. I mean, if they're not attacking you, then I don't see why you even need to care. I mean, if
Yeah,
they're
me neither.
attacking you, sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just thought I interpreted this as when one's own convictions are attacked. Yeah, I guess it wouldn't really happen where you'd need to just butt into, because it needs to be where your own convictions are attacked, and I guess you're involved, unless,
I guess I tend to think this principle here is questionable to me.
yeah,
Do you really need to speak out? I mean, yeah, it's enough to say, I disagree, or if you're having a discussion, then you should be intellectually honest and say what you mean. And if you don't disagree, make it clear what you think. But if it's just like out of nowhere, I don't think you even need to care. Other
right,
than you can say I'm not going to put up with it, or you can say, well, I'm just leaving the talk. But I don't see why you need to even declare something about it with your words. I mean, in one sense, if you're being attacked, you don't need to force yourself to put up with it.
right,
But a lot of the time, I think you could just ignore it, and no one would think you're endorsing it as much as you're not tolerating poor treatment or irrationality. But
but
if somebody said
okay,
like
yeah, go on,
they're attacking rights or something, and I'm just around, I don't see what it would even matter that I say anything.
right,
I think Rand almost took this one too far. That I think she tended to be very sensitive when people criticized her, and I almost think this one is there's no real good basis for this.
right. But let's say someone does think, like, I'm just trying to understand this idea of endorsing a view. Like,
Mhm.
who cares how someone like, all that matters is the action you take. No, like, if we're talking about just conversations at uh, you know, cocktail party, like, who cares about any of that? That's what I wasn't clear on. Like, endorsement or no endorsement, like, um, these people aren't politicians. They're not going to change anything. So that's the context where I didn't understand. Like, someone says something at a table and you're sitting at a table and they say, yeah, everyone should do this at age 30 and we should make it a law. Uh,
Yeah,
like, but
I
they're
would
just some
say
random
like
person. Like, what is that?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I don't see why silence would say even suggest you've endorsed it. Nor do I think anybody would really interpret it that way. Like I don't think it seems too much based on how people interpret you, not about what you're saying.
right,
I mean, it just seems like if you're trying to communicate something, then yes. If you're trying to, I don't know, demonstrate, um, well, I don't know. I would almost say that you ignore it. You don't pay attention to it. You talk about what you want to. I can't see why being quiet would really mean anything.
but just to play devil's advocate, this is the thing I was interested in. Let's say they do think you endorse their view. Let's say their view is, there's three of you and they're talking about how we have to save the environment and we need to ban all these different things and we need to tax these companies and do that. And like, but they're just talking amongst themselves. I understand in that case you can say I disagree or whatever if you do feel that way and you think it's wrong. But let's say you don't, and now their view apparently is endorsed. What happens then? That's what I'm not clear on. Like, so what?
Um,
I don't see any consequences here. And like, I get it if they're like, they're at a control panel. I don't see the abstract long-term consequences is what I can say. I get it. They're at a control panel. They're going to shoot a nuclear bomb. And you're like, I disagree. Okay. All right. I better not shoot this nuclear bomb.
yeah.
But I don't get like when it's just some people talking and that they're not really able to do anything with that.
Mm,
Do you know any, like how to, yeah, I can't project what would that be if it was endorsed.
let's see. Which is not. I guess it really depends on what does it mean in his presence. I mean, if somebody said something insulting about me and I was famous and somebody wrote it and they live in, I don't know, Germany and they wrote something I thought was very egregious and an attack on me. Would that count as in my presence because I
I
have
don't know.
a global fan base?
Yeah,
Like
so
what
that's
counts as in my
application.
presence? Like if I'm in the same room and I hear them and they're like talking about me or implying that they're trying to say something about me, then I would I think it'd be important to communicate that I don't want them to keep endorsing this. I don't want them to go on about this. It would seem like that let's just I don't see why the silence would matter much usually though.
Right. Okay. But yeah, I guess I just can't see the long range consequences of not doing it. Like you're at a cocktail party in Germany, 1935, and everyone's talking about how great Hitler's going to be. And you're
Yeah.
like whether you say I disagree or not, I just don't see,
I think at least in
you know,
circumstances like that, I'm not thinking of it as like your silence means you're endorsing it, but I would still say that speaking up can influence and affect others. And by not saying anything,
right.
it'd almost be like presuming that nobody cares, nobody wants to do anything, and you're pessimistic that anyone cares. And
Yeah.
I would only speak out to the extent that I want people to know that I support these ideas. People might feel that they have no support.
Right.
Everybody's saying, say, Hitler's the best leader of Germany since forever, and everybody's afraid to say, "Oh, I disagree." If you say it, it
Yeah.
can encourage people to consider and
Right.
think about their principles,
Right.
and that can change things. And I would think it'd be bad to be silent if you see or hear about injustice. People are talking about it. I see it more as a matter of persuasion. And if you care about the world you live in, then you should care about persuasion at times. That if you're in an environment where your views can at least have some impact, even just to say I disagree, you lend support to others at least. You lend at least some support in their mind that they're not alone and their ideas can have an impact.
This is
So
where I have trouble with some of the virtues or certain applications is that example of like, that makes sense. And I guess that's true, but in the long run, does it make a difference? Like it's hard to concretize that in a way
yeah,
that you're like, yes, this definitely, I have to do this. Otherwise, like the peak off example, my head will be chopped off, or it's $1,000,000 for the price of my head being chopped off. Like
yeah,
to project that out is to me is anyway, I can't, it's quite difficult. It's even if you think about voting, for example, right? Like
yeah.
if you convince one person of what one thing and they're going to vote for someone who you support, like how many times is it 50, 50% to 50% that one marginal voter matters anyway? So that's my thinking. And so it's hard to then see long range, like what this kind of stuff does.
I think it is hard. I think that's where specialized knowledge can come in. That it's hard to extend these things out unless we have these broad principles or fields of thinking. I think history is a good example of
Right.
one way to extend out your thinking. Or if you're an expert in economics, you could see where these things extend. it's hard to do just about, say we're having a small conversation like this,
Yeah.
or just talking about some written things down. If you really want to integrate it, you need to bring in other fields of thinking where there
Right.
actually are examples of these wider contexts of what happens as a result of small, like a trade between two people. Like economics can tell you the extent that a trade between two individuals can have an impact on an entire society.
Right. 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 Yeah.
And you couldn't
Um,
normally do that without economics. Like you didn't have economics, it wouldn't make sense. Like, how do I know that paying money for, like trading you for, I don't know, if like you grew a potato and I buy it with money. I mean, I could say, oh, it looks nice here, but how do I know that money isn't corrupting this trade, or how do I know that money isn't actually making it harder for other people? You get to
right.
take economics, just consider what is money, how does that affect people, and so on.
Got it. It's quite hard to find the like even in those specialized fields, it's still, especially in economics, it might not be easy to find the very concrete examples and not just these floating abstractions. But yeah, I mean, what you're saying makes sense. So you've got to integrate other fields of specialized study to get good examples of this. Like history is, I think you're right about history being a good example. Um, yeah, like, the founding fathers, they studied a lot of Greek and Roman history, right? Ancient Greek
Yes,
history. And that's how they came up with the ideas for their government. And so they've probably found examples of the way things work. And then that you formulate a principle on that basis.
definitely. And a lot of reasoning about law, a lot of knowledge about common law in England and things like that.
Right. Okay. So later on, he talks about, on a personal level, justice is adherence to the Traitor Principle. And so I was like, where did he drop this Traitor Principle from? Like, I know it's from Atlas Shrugged, but like, so is that part of justice, or is it a virtue? Like, what is this in the context of all these big virtues that are kinds of rationality? What is the Traitor Principle?
I think it's just exchanging value for value. Like if I have a potato and you have an apple, I don't want the potato, but I want the apple. And you want the potato, but I don't want the apple. We'll
Yeah.
trade it because we attain a higher value through that such a trade, and that we gain value from each other with that exchange.
And so that is what justice is basically. It's just trade.
Yeah, on a very concrete level. But I mean, if you treat somebody well, they want to be your friend, for instance, maybe. And that's kind of an exchange, like not in a monetary way, but
Yeah.
you're both getting value out of the exchange. Out of communicating with somebody, you're gaining value. And it's a beneficial thing for both people involved.
Right.
And
Okay.
it's not just punishment. It's, as we've been talking about, it's understanding what people deserve in the positive sense, rewarding things.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, it's just an interesting connection to make trade to justice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay. And so within the virtue of justice, there's principles. Is that how it works with these virtues, or like within each
Yeah.
principle there might be other principles, like
There's
nested?
overlap.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, it's a principle that's overlap with other virtues, I think.
Like to what? What else would
It probably
trade?
overlaps with just rights as a concept of rights. They're not identical, but like rights aren't necessarily forms of justice. I mean, not rights aren't really, well, there's something else, so I'll say. And Traitor Principle does cover that, but it also covers justice, and they're not identical. It's not, rights don't fit neatly under justice.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just to treat people with their rights, but not all acts of, but you can do something within your rights that's unjust. So it's not
Right.
just it's not a perfect overlap.
Right. but it's this Traitor Principle is part of being virtuous. It's like, it's not a
Yes.
virtue, but it's a part of virtues. Is that
It's part of virtuous thinking.
okay?
It's definitely an element you need to understand. It connects politics to ethics, essentially. Like that's the connection point.
Oh, the Traitor Principle is a connection between politics and ethics. I thought this
I
was
would say so.
justice in general was the connection between.
Yeah, I could say justice in general, but in particular, I would say the Traitor Principle specifically. Like
Okay.
it's focused more on that exchange of value for value than it is
Yeah.
necessarily doing the just thing. Clearly, you can do unjust things that could be within your rights. It's unjust to mistreat a good friend if they've truly treated you
Right.
as a good friend. It's not just.
Right.
Even though it's within your rights, it's not just.
Right. Right. Um, yeah. Okay. And then, so, okay. Is there much talked about on this in practical application? Because, yeah, I mean, in the big sort of picture view, it sounds fine. Like, it makes sense to me. You get value for value. You find a friend that you like and that you enjoy spending time with. But what would it mean to give in return for what you receive and receive in return for what you give? And to weigh, like, to even weigh that in my mind, it's not a, like, there's no numbers I can use to represent what someone's value is. And so what would be an objective, if, we're talking about objectivity here, what would be an objective way to do that, like in practice to,
Um, I can't
and
think of
I don't
anything.
mean that in a literally a ledger, but I mean,
Yeah,
like, being able to, because it can be, I think you can, uh, if you're not, I think you can definitely spend more time than you need to with people when you don't self-monitor. And I'm not saying because they're bad. I just mean like, okay,
yeah.
well, that was nice, but I don't want to spend more time with this person now. I've got to focus on this or work on that.
Yeah.
And but I don't even know how you do those calculations. Is there much written about that or?
Written about it, I'm not sure. Oh, 1 second.
Sure.
So I don't know anything in objectivism written about that in particular. I can't think of anything specific other than the books I've told you about already.
Yeah,
But
virtuous.
ways to measure it would be like, questions you would ask would be like, what value am I getting out of this? In what way is my life changing or getting better, even if it's a simple thing? I mean, certain questions are, you might want to decide the value of a certain family member, which you might want to take bigger questions in mind, but you still have to ask what kind of value is happening here. Like, is my life improved from this
Right.
interaction or person or thing?
Right.
That'd be one immediate question. And you can measure that by the standards of like, what is ethics? Like, what is good for your life? Like, is it good for your health? Does it help your thinking? Do you act like a better person?
Yeah.
Are you more aware of other people or something? You have to look at different benefits or what happens when you interact with this value.
Okay. So you're saying you weigh it up against, all you're doing is you're simply weighing it up against, it's not that it's not a ledger. It's more like when let's say you spend time with someone or people, you're trying to weigh up the gain in terms of an objective morality. So you're like, all right, do I become more an independent person, or do I become more of a just person? Do I improve the way, like, what aspects of me change or improve? What kind of enjoyment do I get?
Yeah.
And wait, is that what you're saying? And that's all it is. It's like, if you feel like you gain something, that's fine. And it's that simple. It's just one, it could be one thing even.
Yeah. The difficulty is just trying to decide when, is it truly doing that thing? Is it truly making your life better, or are you rationalizing it, or
I
to
agree.
what degree? Because while it might be valuable, are you sacrificing for something else?
I agree.
Or are
Yeah,
you avoiding something else?
I agree. Yeah, that's not easy. Oh, okay. But so, I mean, I guess this is just giving the broad sweeps, but yeah, it is hard. The application is quite, and like to make all of these things concrete seems quite difficult.
Yeah. You could also look at how much impact it does have in your life. Like certain things aren't as big, so you could say things that aren't as big aren't as important. Like it's not that big a deal if you choose to eat chocolate or vanilla ice cream. It's not that big a deal. I mean, it has some bearing, but it's not the same as obviously deciding where to move,
Yeah, that's
like where you're
true.
going to live for the next 5 years. I mean,
Yeah,
the weight is different.
yeah,
They're both relevant questions, and you don't want to eat a flavor like because I mean you eat a flavor for whatever standard you pick. Like you enjoy chocolate, and that could be enough of a decision, and you don't need to really think about deeper than that. But that's a way to decide, do I value vanilla or chocolate more?
yeah.
But it's nothing in comparison to where am I going to live the next 5 years?
Right. Weigh the consideration yeah, each different things will be weighed differently according to the impact they have on your life.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess one aspect of this, it does suddenly delve into psychology, but it's like, how does a person weigh or compare values? Because I've tried to do that mentally. Like, what do I like this person more than that person? Or what about this person in relation to that person? And sometimes I feel like you can do it. And sometimes I feel like it almost seems like different things. And it's like an incommensurate. Uh,
Yeah.
but
I've
I
thought
couldn't really
before
find much on
about
that.
how things could be of equal value. I don't know if everything has to strictly be greater or less than. I think they could be equal sometimes.
Right.
That makes it even harder. And I
Yeah.
think intuition matters a lot here. That often your first impression is pretty accurate about the value of things. But if you notice bad things happening in your life, that's when you might want to question it. But often your intuitions are pretty good about your values.
Yeah.
Like I don't need
Mm.
to think very hard to think about um, the way I like cooking or something like that. It's not. I'm not really analyzing it as deeply,
Yeah.
but it fits with my intuitions. It feels good. It strikes me as interesting. It gets my creativity going. So I see more positive benefits, and my life is going great because even with those things, like it's never caused problems. It helps me improve my confidence, things like that.
Right.
So I
So
can see almost intuitively that it's helping me. It's making my life better.
it's
It's worthwhile.
right. It's obvious. There's a lot of concrete examples that come to mind, and you've got your Aristotelian chef coach, and
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. um, yeah, I mean, I think I still think there's. It's not as easy for me, by the way. I still feel like
Yeah.
this could be like a whole branch or something in psychology where they help you weigh values and think about your hierarchy so you spend time well. Because
Yeah.
I don't find it that simple. I have so many competing interests,
I
like
know.
bizarre interests that I have nothing to that almost seem like they don't have anything to do with one another. And yeah, but it's not. I don't find that easy at all. Like this whole
Oh, I run
weighing.
into that a lot. I've got so many interests in projects that I want to do, and none of them always, they really seem related.
Right. Yeah, and then in that case, it seems like it's pretty. Even in every other case, it seems like it would be important to just explicitly have some kind of clear standard and weigh values well, which I don't actually. That hierarchy of values, yeah, that's a completely different topic. So we did, I think, briefly discuss that a while ago. But yeah, being able to explicitly hold a hierarchy of values and then know how to use your time most
Yeah.
efficiently with yourself and with other people. Like in theory, it's all great. and I sort of get the broad outline of it. But then when it comes to the application of that theory, I'm like, well, but anyway, we'll just. Yeah. So what's this about? The individual has a right to demand payment for his values. Like, I get that you can have is that just simply an expectation? Like if I give something to someone, for me to I will hope that the best in them will also give something back. But I just didn't get the language. Like, what does it mean? What kind of
I'm
payment are
not
we
sure if he's
demanding here?
metaphorical here.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if he literally means right, or he means metaphorically, like in the way like I have a right to be treated justly.
Right.
It doesn't mean that the same as a political right, and like
Yeah.
you have the right to not to your life and all that.
Right. Right.
But this almost seems metaphorical, and I'm not sure what he means.
Okay. He's the picture man at the moment. He's weaving webs above the
Sounds
flowing
like
river.
the picture man.
What about, like, all right, what if you go by this and you create values of character that you're proud of, does that mean you have a right to demand payment from others? And let's just go with, should we just replace it with expect?
Yeah, let's just replace with expect for now.
So
That you
what
should
would,
be able to expect. It would be just to expect, or it would be just of other people to pay you for those values, to acknowledge. I mean, justice goes both ways. Like you should be just, but others also ought to be just. And in a way, if you're giving value, people ought to repay it in some manner. And that would be right of you, correct of you, to ask like, hey, I don't think you paid any, I don't think you offered anything back. It doesn't have to be like monetary, but you could be like, oh, I treated you well. Why are you treating me so badly today? For example, or you could say, oh, I helped you out with your, like mowing your lawn. Like, why are you avoiding ever helping me do something? Things like that. Like, it's not like you're offering value and providing it, but they're not giving anything back. It's unjust of them to do that. Of course, you shouldn't be doing that out of like you're guilt tripping them. That'd be wrong too. But insofar as you really meant it and did it like, authentically and weren't just going for social capital, then yeah, you could rightfully ask like, hey, why am I being mistreated?
well, so, okay, let's try see how this actually plays out then. I think those examples are, I mean, there are good examples that you could delve into it, but it would need to be more concrete. Like, for example, with mowing the lawn, like that could just be someone, it's harder to say what that is. Like, people might not think about that. They might think about that, but let's go with the values of character. Like, you've worked really hard to make yourself morally perfect yourself, become an independent person who thinks creatively and takes into account what people say, but thinks about it for himself, doesn't take over concepts from others, all this kind of stuff. And so you work really hard to cultivate certain moral values of character. And so what then what do you, I'm just trying to understand the kind of posture you have to the world. So you're like, you meet someone and you're like, I have good qualities of character, so I expect that if this person has virtue, he will like me. But then, so what? I don't
think he's referring to those kind of things. I think he's referring more to, say you make something. I don't know, you make what's an example? Say you build a house.
Right.
You built that value, created it. And somebody might say, like, and you want to get rid of it. Let's say, well, no, you'll sell it, or just say you'll sell it for a lot of money.
Right.
And somebody comes by, well, how could you ask for a price? Just give it to me for free. Just give it to me because I need it or something. Imagine just somebody just asking for it. Like, what would you say? Why can't they have it? They ask for it for free, but why would you say no?
Mhm.
Just because you want more money? Or is there
Right.
some reason underlying it? Like, why don't you care about their needs or something?
Right. Okay.
So it's just of you to say, hey, I spent time to make this thing. I built it with my mind. It took me time. And I would like some sort of value exchange here. Just, I mean, maybe you might recognize that they're a dear friend of yours and there's a reason you built the house for them. But you have some expectation of some value exchange here. It's not like you just give it to them out of merely the fact that they exist. You should have an exchange, actually, that your values should deserve something in return that you've created since you took the time to build it.
You but you can just as well apply that to cultivating moral character. That same
But how do
argument
you give it to
almost.
somebody else? It's not something
By
you could ever
spending, like, if
exchange.
you spend time with people, I mean, or like if you go somewhere and you meet people, then shouldn't there be some, I'm trying to figure out what this expectation would look like in that context. Because it's the same example. You've put in time to cultivate character. You've made tough decisions and choices, and to act on moral virtue, building up the content of your character through habit and second nature and all these things. And so I
The
was
way I'm
thinking,
understanding this sentence, though, is exchanging
okay,
something that you literally give to someone
okay,
else that
yeah, okay,
you no longer possess and give to someone
right,
else,
right, right, okay, I
like a
understand.
birthday present. And I'm not sure if he means it any other way. I
Yeah,
don't think he's referring to these more general, like um, good character things, or that you're
yeah,
not giving away, but emanate from you, I guess you could say.
yeah, okay, all right, so then we can skip that. When we're talking about deserving something, to deserve a moral or material spiritual, a positive material spiritual is not a primary condition. Would you say it's just synonymous for expect, and like have the hold in mind the idea that it is right for me to receive um, uh, yeah, I'm just trying to deserve is an expectation.
Mm. I would say what ought to happen to you for doing this
Okay,
action.
okay. Oh, cause and effect. Is that what it is? It gets the root of deserve is cause and
Yeah, I
effect.
mean, you get what you deserve. You face the consequences of what you do. Like, all your actions have consequences.
All right, let's see what this next thing is. Nothing can be unearned and unpaid for in the universe, neither in matter nor in spirit. And if the guilty do not pay, then the innocent have to pay it. What was I asking here? Am I the guilty? So in the case of, like, let's say download music or a course, which is not really as applicable today, but with Spotify and all that. But let's say you download something, then the innocent is the person who's produced that, right? Because they're missing out on payment for their value they've created.
Yeah.
Okay. I think where I struggle with some of this, I mean, that example makes sense, but it's like I can see some of it. I can see little examples, but I don't feel like it's enough for me to just jump and go in the same way that I say all men are mortal, and I'm like, yeah, I can jump to that. But to some of these, I'm like, all right, I can see it works in a few examples, but my mind still feels uh, like it's not ready to jump to the whole abstraction and go, yeah, 100% that's true.
Yeah, that's a big abstraction here, I
Yeah.
would say.
Do you feel the same way, like with a lot of these things? Like you can see a few instances where it's working, but you can't. Your mind just isn't. Well, it's not that
Yeah.
your mind's not letting you, because you can think, but you just feel like there's something not right. Like I can't make the jump.
Yeah, there's a big jump there.
Yeah.
It's like, you know that they pay in the sense that, and I can explain it, but it's still so much information in that
Yeah.
I might not even be sure what he means.
Yeah. Okay, cool. By the way, we're almost finished all of we've covered a lot. We've covered basically all of the important sections of OPA. So let's have a look at this stuff. Okay. No human life that is safe enough, long enough, knowledgeable enough, not if man's life is the standard of value. By the way, I think I've got a new conception of this. I want to get your thoughts on it. Originally, I remember when I had this, when we first started, I was asking about this because I just didn't understand it. And now I'm thinking, if our nature, what do you think of this? If our nature is us being conceptual beings, meaning we have almost an infinite range of possible knowledge, we can keep expanding that knowledge, then to live by our nature is to keep expanding non-stop, infinitely. It wouldn't be to stop. Our nature is to be, keep infinitely growing and getting more and more powerful and knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
That's how I see it.
Huh.
That can almost sound Nietzschean, actually, because he's always about growth and even reaching a stage where you're beyond mankind. Like you evolve that there's a future stage of man that you can think we're now in the age of reason in a sense that we're in a different level than we were like 10,000 years ago living in caves.
Yeah.
So there could be a point where man is beyond their usual sense of morality, that he's grown to such a degree that he no longer needs these old concepts. But the idea underlying is that there's always eternal growth, always trying to go for more power, in the sense of you feel like a strong individual, that you're impassioned, you're filled with life, that kind of power. I mean,
Right.
like a power of life.
Right.
And that just keeps growing and growing over time.
Right. Yeah, I wonder what he was like. Maybe that's just that was just his. Maybe that is like a natural. I don't know if I can say natural, but that's a feeling that you. I don't know. A feeling that anyone can have, like that you want to keep growing. A lot of people have that, right? Like you talk about someone being ambitious or something. There's some quotes by Dostoevsky about this, about like man going for this incessantly striving.
Yes.
And then obviously we've got, it is possible that once we get all this technology, like that Elon Musk developing the chip to put in the brain and all this other stuff, we might turn into cyborgs. And then, yes, there may be a need for a new conception of morality. But it's strange because even if you turn into a cyborg, you're still saying that's in your nature because you're a conceptual being.
Yes. Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, okay. Let's see if I can find this quote. All right, anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll skip it because there's a quote from Dostoevsky relating to this, but okay. Okay. Productive work is the process by which man's consciousness controls his existence, a constant process of acquiring knowledge and shaping matter. Acquiring knowledge and shaping matter to fit one's purpose, of translating an idea into physical form, of remaking the earth in the image of one's values. It's very biblical.
Yes.
Okay, so there are two integrated components. I think I'm focusing on this: existence, thought, and action, knowledge, and its material implementation. Neither of these components is dispensable to any. So as I was trying to get my head around, I guess philosophy tutoring is a service, but so that isn't, but there's no material. It's like, I'm just trying to figure out this distinction between material value and spiritual value. Like, okay, I'm paying you to tutor me, but I don't see any, I mean, I'm recording the conversations, but like, how do I think of it in terms of all this being said here? Like turning an idea into physical form, remaking the earth in the image of one's values. Like, how do you think about activities in those terms?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, without rephrasing what she wrote, how could I interpret this? Like physical form doesn't. I mean, what am I? I mean, I was almost wondering, like, to what extent is producing in you the physical form, in a sense?
Okay. I don't know. But
Yeah.
what about, all right, let's take a different example. Let's take a psychologist. Like, what is he, how is he shaping matter to fit his purpose?
The only way I could think of that is that influencing a person in a way that it changes that the result is how you've changed a person.
Right.
That's what you've produced. I mean, that's how I'm trying to understand it.
Okay.
In this, if I'm not reinterpreting Rand, just taking what she said, physical form, that's how I would interpret it, or that's how I could say what the value is. It's enacted in the other person.
Okay. Enactment is the physical form.
Yeah, I would say so, that a person is living out those ideas in themselves, that they can then take what they've learned and apply
Right.
it to their own creations.
Right. So if I compliment someone as an act of justice, then I've enacted, I've shaped, I've acquired knowledge and shaped. It's a bit of a stretch to say I've shaped matter, but I've
Well, if I tell
done.
you, it's more further steps away. Like, say, if I explain to you the different ideas of justice because I believe they're important to living a good life, and then imagine you were, I don't know, started a business and you took what you learned
Right.
about justice and applied it. You've made those things real. Like, it's more like several steps away that
Yeah.
I'm producing something.
Right.
I'm not the direct producer. Like, I produce the ideas that you've then taken to then produce something based on the ideas I gave you.
Yeah. I do find this idea of thinking about work in these terms interesting because I like, um, like if I a couple of days ago, for example, I was reflecting on a movie I watched and trying to write down, uh, trying to get my thoughts on a paper about the movie in terms of plot, in terms of theme, in terms of characterization, in terms of style, in terms of philosophical ideas. And so I'm wondering about, like, was that a productive activity? Because I mean, I have it on an electronic copy of it, but did I remake the earth in the image of my values? Like, what that, I mean, that's pretty interesting to me to go, it sounds beautiful, but how do you, like, if I throw that activity of writing this movie review for myself, for my own clarification, through this lens of productive work being shaping matter to fit one's purpose, have I actually done productive work? Like, all I've got is a digital copy of some movie I watched, and but I don't feel like I've remade the earth in the image of my values. I haven't shaped matter to fit my purpose. And so if it's a process and it includes all those things, then the movie review suddenly was not a productive activity. Like that, I'm nitpicking this because I'm like, I feel like it might have implications in terms of the kind of work I do.
Yeah. I mean, I think the physical form is just how you live out like the way you live, not just the thoughts of it, but how it translates into your actions
Right.
in the world. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a grand creation as much as like the way you live is itself the physical form. I mean, that remaking the earth is more poetic, I think. I don't think she's trying to say that it's literally everything you do will directly translate into like sculpting the earth, but in a metaphorical sense, you're shaping how reality is, and you're part of reality. You're shaping your mind and body you're shaping how you behave. You're shaping how you act in the world physically, not just some dream world, but the world itself as you interact with it.
Yeah, I feel like there's even something to this apart from just the figurative, metaphorical beauty of remaking the earth in the image of one's values. I feel like there is something to it. For example, I used to work in a call center and it was terrible. I hated it. But I did it because I didn't think I could find a job and all this stuff. But in that case, you're working in something where even if you've got another project going and you're trying to work on something, you're participating in something that maybe is helping you in some way. Like, let's say it's helping you earn a bit of money to get by or whatever, and you do need that. But there's such a big disconnect between the kind of work you're doing and the way you're earning money and, let's say, your overall image of how things should be. In that, let's say, because I was doing it in it was a bank and they were doing, I don't know, loans or something like that, which I thought all of it was stupid. And personal loans. I was doing personal loans. But like in that case, you're kind of, yeah, okay, it's helping you earn money, let's say, and save up for something else, but you're doing it in a way where you're not participating in the kind of activity that you feel remakes the earth in the image of your values. Versus, say, if you were working a job where you're earning less, but you were you're helping construct a building or something, because at least then you feel like you're doing something. I don't know if that makes any sense, but my point is that I feel like there is more to this than possibly.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the way you engage your mind, I think, is a big part of it. That the more you the more you use these things that necessary for your survival, the more self-esteem and happiness and flourishing you feel. That the more you use your mind, the more rewarding it is. And that's kind of what I'm thinking. That manual labor has its place, but the value you get from things is more mental than that. It's not just these physical movements we do. We have to expand more, engage more of our nature, I think, to feel fulfilled.
Right.
It's not just about going through the motions, but actually using your entire nature, engaging all of yourself.
Right.